Thank you for joining us on the Raising Global Leaders series. Today, I have Devon Bandison with me. He's a TEDx speaker, he's an author, and he's an amazing father. Thank you, Devon, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Liana. I am excited, and I just want to acknowledge you for the great work you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so Devon, I have to ask, what is it that got you into leadership?
Yeah, so early on in my career, I worked for a nonprofit organization. I was working with what they used to call at-risk youth, and I never liked that term. So I used to change it to at-hope youth. So we used to go into the homes, and eventually I moved up in that organization and became the director. And I was always into kind of coaching and leadership development, not formally, but I was always into like personal development. So before I started my own company, I started implementing some leadership into that organization. And one of the things I did there was I started a early fatherhood program for first-time fathers. So, you know, I'm a big believer. I'm a father of three. I was a young father at the time. And I'm a big believer, teach the thing you need to learn the most, right? So I started, right? So I started this program, and it was really successful in New York City. And in my work there, Liana, I started to realize these distinctions, that went together between being a great leader and being a great father. Similar how fatherhood, like leadership, isn't about your title. There's a lot of people who I work with who have titles of being a leader. I go to a company and the CEO says he's a leader, but he has no leadership. But I leave that same company and I see the guy who's cleaning the bathrooms with 10 people around him at the end of the day. That's leadership, because leadership isn't about your title. Leadership is about influence.
Right. Absolutely. And so going into talking about your title and how titles change, so you mentioned in your book that you went through a divorce and you were committed to being a father regardless of how your relationship panned out.
Yeah.
I think that that's really difficult for a lot of people to decide. So how did you come to that decision and to be so firm on it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have a recent example as well. So that example was really powerful. It showed me in my work with people and myself, what I realized, Liana, is words create our world. See, we have to be careful of the words we're saying out here, because our words literally will create our world. Look at the power of a word, right? If you go past a house, the difference between it saying for sale or sold, or the difference between married and divorced, or even if you looked at me and there was 10 men here, you wouldn't say that's a Devon. The only way I'm a Devon is someone gave me a word and enough people agreed on it. So when I went through the divorce, what I realized was I was giving these words to what people normally said was like, this is a difficult divorce. So I'd wake up, I'd say, you know, this is a difficult divorce, and I try to make a little bit of a change. So I'd show up, I'd say I'm going to walk with integrity, but eventually I would fall back into old habits and say something like, I can only take this much, right? Until one day I realized that change isn't what I needed to do. I needed what I call a breakthrough, right? So if a change looks like this, a breakthrough is here and it's something new. And in that breakthrough, I said, this no longer will be a difficult divorce. And it doesn't matter how she reacts or what she does. I am responsible for making this the best transition ever. And through that, I just showed up. And the thing I didn't do, Liana, was say, hey, I'm doing the right thing. You shouldn't argue no more. Or, hey, look, I'm trying to be the better person. I didn't do any of that. I just showed through my actions like what integrity looked like. And about a year into that, my ex-wife looked at me and said, you want to have a conversation? And what I realized in that, Liana, was a lot of people say, you know, Devon, just tell me what to do, you know, to this tough situation. Or they tell me, if I just had the right partner or the right ex, then I would do the right thing. Then I would be happy. Then I would be with integrity. Then I would be a leader. And so they live this life of either do, have, be, or have, do, be. But my experience has shown me that it's really the right order is be, do, have. So if you want to be, who do you need to be in the moment? If you know who you need to be in the moment, then you'll know what to do and then you'll have what you want. So that was the shift. And then the other thing I did in the divorce was I started writing out to myself, I am going to recreate myself as the best ex-husband ever. So what happened was when we used to go out and stuff would come up and maybe I was struggling with it, I would ask myself, what would the best ex-husband ever do? So I would do that. And then after practicing that after a while, and I never told her this, I never said, hey, I'm creating myself as, no, I just showed up. She turns to me, I think it was last year, and guess what she said? You know, you're the best ex-husband ever. I was like, ah! So the point is, it's not about me. I'm no different than anyone else. The only difference is it's about practice. And what you're practicing as a daily habit of who you're being in the world will have an impact on the people around you.
I love that. Do, be, have. That's awesome.
Be, do, have.
Be, do, have. Be
Yeah.
who you want to be. Do what you have to do, and then you'll have what you want. That's awesome. Okay, I appreciate that. So, you would go out of your way to get on the train to go pick up Amari from school.
Yeah.
How important do you think consistency is to modeling leadership in fatherhood?
Yeah, it's such, I think it's number one, actually, consistency. You know, it was a 3-hour ride and there was never hesitancy for me of, oh my God, I have to pick up my son. You know, the other thing with language I tell people is, you know, for the next 30 days, stop saying have to and change it to get to, right? Mm-hmm. So I get to pick up my son. The one I struggle with is I get to pay taxes, right? That one, I'm like, all right, but it is true, right? If I didn't make money, I wouldn't pay taxes. So it was really consistency, Liana, is so important, because what I wanted to do during that difficult time was show him that, you know, a lot of children internalize things and they think that it's their fault, and then they start acting out in different ways and they look for attention. So I started doing something where I would pick him up from school Friday and we'd stop in Penn Station and do pizza night. And that was our ritual that we would do every single Friday, because it was halfway between New Jersey and Queens. And he knew that it was like our special day. And I committed to him during that time we were separating and divorcing, that at least for 6 months, I would not miss a Friday night. And the consistency of that, I could literally see our son settle in, right? Where they're anxious at first when, you know, you break up, you leave the home, and he started settling in and having joy and fun. And that was our ritual. And we still do it to this day. And I'll never forget the consistency was, you know, people say they don't have enough time. You know, they talk about time management, but the problem really isn't time management. It's people pleasing. They're saying yes to things that aren't as much of a priority and saying no to the things that are. So they get stressed. So for me, I had to be clear that this was my number one priority, this consistency with my son. And then, you know, it's paid off. And during that time, I remember I got a phone call from a place to speak in California, which is, as a New Yorker, I love California. It's like my second home. So it was this big conference. It was back when I was starting speaking, and it was like more money. I was like, oh, they pay you that much for 45 minutes? You know, and usually keynotes are on Saturday. So the guy said, hey, Devon, I said, this is the conference I always wanted to speak at. I'll do it. Send me the contract. He sends me over. This was 3 months into my commitment to Amari. And I looked at the date, and it's Friday. And I called the guy back and said, hey, I'm sorry I can't make it this Friday. And he was like looking at me like I was crazy. I was turning that down. I said, I have a family commitment. And because at that time I knew my son needed me more. And that consistency paid off. And, you know, I got a lot of speaking engagements after that were on other days. And now, because we've had years of this, you know, if I do have to go away on a Friday, he understands, and we're uniquely just connected through it.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you talk in your book about how you had a really difficult relationship with your father, but it seemed like your father was a pretty good leader in the community. How can fathers reconcile with it being easier for them to lead outside of the home than it is for them to lead their own kids sometimes?
Oh, I got chills by your questions, by the way. Your questions are so good. So this, I think, is one of the biggest distinctions of the new way of fatherhood, right? Where back the old style of leadership was a kind of like, do as I say, not as I do, right? So what I call it is your audio matching your video? Is what you're saying acting what you playing out in what you're doing? And back in the days, there was a lot of that where fathers, they would be really seen a certain way in the community, but yet they struggled because, you know, it takes a lot of inner work to really be intimate with your child and family. So I think it's really just awareness. It's a work in progress. It's fathers being okay, men especially understanding that vulnerability doesn't make you weak. It's actually takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable, and you know, it comes from the Latin root core, which means from the heart. And I think it's a process. The thing we can't do with fathers is to start trying to shame fathers in different communities, because research has shown that there's more fathers involved in their children's life today than any time in history. And that's in the African American community, that's in the Latino community, that's in several different communities. Yet we keep feeding into this storyline of like this fatherhood crisis. And for me, it's to bring awareness that there is no fatherhood crisis. Yeah, there's areas where we can do better, but when you're trying to uplift people, you don't point out all the things they're doing wrong. You start trying to highlight the things they're doing well. So for me, that's the shift. That, you know, to reconcile that is, one, as a father, I had to reconcile my relationship with my father. I knew that forgiveness was part of the process. And for me, it freed me up to be better in every other relationship in my life. So I think it's, one, bringing awareness to like this father's doing some great work out here. Two, does your audio match your video? Not that you have to be perfect, but you want to be in a line. And three, reconcile your own issues with your father.
Yeah. I love how you choose the way you communicate with your father very carefully. In the book, you really show self-awareness in centering yourself and your feelings first, and then the kind of analyzing where you want to go and then responding. I think that's awesome. But I really, more than that, I love how you model that to your kids. So they're able to see this healthy relationship with you and your father now that you didn't see growing up. I don't hear you mention your grandfather in the book. Was he involved in your life?
No, he passed away early on, and then my other grandfather wasn't around, so we didn't see him much. But you know, you make two great points, and the benefit of that, right, of breaking that cycle, Liana, is that my children have an amazing relationship with their grandfather. And you talk about, you know, I know you're an emotional intelligence like guru, right? So I think that the intelligence of checking in with your thinking, because just because, you know, we go around thinking just because I think something doesn't make it true, right? So an example for me is, my favorite quote in the world is Mozart says, music isn't in the notes, music is in the space between the notes, right? So for me, it's always, it's like in life, when I have space in between my thoughts, it allows me to get aligned with what's really going on. Right. So I remember taking my father to the Met game once, and we're sitting in like the first row, and like I got good tickets, and it's those seats that are cushioned, that they deliver the food. They're not like throwing hot dogs at you, like they're delivering the food. So we're sitting there, and back in the day, because I wasn't reconciled with the relationship, I'd want like validation from him and all this. And I remember sitting there, and there was part of me that was like, is this guy gonna say thank you, right? Yeah. So we're sitting there, and he turns to me, and he looks at me kind of like this and does something like, good to have you back. Now let me tell you, talk about checking in with your thoughts, because in my head, I'm thinking, oh, no, he didn't. He's ungrateful. What does he mean, have you back? You never brought me to anything like this. So now in my head, you know, when people are hurt, then they become angry. And then the next step is, so hurt, anger, and then sometimes you go to vindictiveness, right? Now you want to hurt them more than they hurt you, because hurt people hurt people. So if I didn't check in with my thinking, I probably would have said something that would have been hurtful, right? Yeah. And in the moment when he says, good to have you back, there was a silence between the notes. There was a silence, there was a space. And in the space, because I allowed that to resolve, what I heard in my head was, that's his way of saying thank you. Mm-hmm. And because I could settle into that, we can enjoy the rest of the game without a resentment.
Yeah, absolutely. You get to choose.
That's it.
You got to choose exactly how you wanted to interpret it. That's incredible, and that's true. You know, that you could have taken it there, and you probably would have been justified in taking it there. Right. But instead, you got to choose how you wanted to hear that. And he probably wasn't just saying thank you. He was probably also saying, I missed you.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to note that one.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so you, a lot of my audience is homeschool parents, entrepreneurs, even like business managers and owners. And one of the things that you didn't really expand upon it much in the book, but you mentioned how you were going on this venture of starting a business while going through a divorce. So you were at a time in your life where everything is shifting, everything, is kind of like becoming this new thing. Yeah. And you're like, hey, my mentor said do a business, start a business, so I guess I'll just throw a business in there. How was that experience for you?
Yeah, it was, I'd like to say it was like really just, I was cool through the whole thing, but there was some fear, right? When I was going through it, a mentor said, build a business around the things you love. And I started it. And it was in the midst of a divorce. And in the divorce, I had what at the time I would call scarcity thinking, right? Mm-hmm. So scarcity is like all the things you think you don't have rather than the things that you're grateful for that you do have. So in my mind, because I'm going through the divorce, my thinking told me she's going to take everything. I'm going to eat ramen noodles the rest of my life, and I'm going to be homeless. Now, not ramen noodles like now it's the chic thing to do to go. No, yeah. I'm talking about like, I don't know if you remember college, them hard ramen noodles packets that you break up, right? Yeah. So this was my thinking. And I have a saying like, there's going to be stuff that comes up. You're going to be afraid or fearful. Do it afraid. So for me, it was like, instead of trying to like build a business in one day, I would wake up and say, how can I move this thing 1 to 5% every day? Because if I move it 1% every day, within 100 days, 3.5 months, I'll be 100% further than I was. So for me, it was to make it doable. And then 2, it was really to check in with being of service. A lot of times when you're going through tough situations, it's about me and survival, and it doesn't allow you to get out of yourself and help others. And for me, if I looked at the success for my business, it was because it was based on being of service to others, not like giving loaded gives. You know how people give loaded gives? They're like, yeah, I'm going to do this because I'm being of service. And then like a week later, they're calling it to like cash in. I don't mean that. I mean, really, truly wanting to make a difference. And for me, I think that mission and vision for me to like really change the whole dynamics of what fatherhood was, and then also help people live better lives, inspired me to be of service. And I think that got me through.
That's awesome. So do it afraid. I love that. Yeah. So that reminds me of something you said in your book. My husband and I were talking about this last night. And I'm a very forward-thinking person. I'm always living in the future. Hence the project Raising Global Leaders. My kids are 7, 6, 3, and 1 on the way. And I'm thinking about them as adults.
Right.
My husband is very right now, in the moment. And so when he thinks about the future, sometimes it's overwhelming for him. And so one thing you said in your book, he said, I'm going to adopt this and I'm going to live my life like this. I love this. So I'm going to read this thing that changed my husband's life. Okay, so you said, just for today, I choose life. Just for today, I choose acceptance. Just for today, I choose compassion. Just for today, I choose forgiveness. Just for today, I choose happiness and freedom. I mean, wow. That's incredible. Can you talk a little bit about how that mindset of just for today has impacted your life?
Yeah, yeah. It was really a powerful awakening to realizing that all of my suffering came from either being in a future or being in the past. If you think of all the suffering that you have, it's usually a worry about a future or something that happened in the past. And I realized that, like, and it's through my work and my teachers, and you know, this didn't just come to me on a bench one day. It was like really practicing and not wanting to suffer, that like the joy that I'm looking for, the happiness will never come someday. It only comes in the here and now. So for me, just for today was adopting a way of life in which I could, everything I want in life, I already have within me. So the happiness isn't going to come one day. You know, once I get enough money, then I'll be happy. Once I, you know, travel to that place, then I'll be happy. Once my wife acts the way I think, then this will be. No, it all happens in the here and now. So for me, I used to have a day on my calendar, Liana, that was Monday through Sunday, and then someday, you know, someday I'm going to make up with my father and reconcile that. Someday I'm going to start my business. Yeah. And when I got out of that and got into just for today, it transformed my life. So if your husband's going to adopt something, that's probably a really good thing, because all the joy and love and happiness in the world only happens in the here and now.
Yeah. That's actually a point in the book where he's like, you know what, I just need to stop reading right now. I just need to sit with that, like, just for today. And he's gotten into the habit of writing out his goals every day. So that really just, like, resonated with him and solidified what he's working towards. And so thank you for that.
And give him my love. Tell him I wish I would have seen him. And I'm happy. I feel like I know him a little now, so it's an honor.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so in your book, you talk about the quartet, like building your quartet, the instruments that you're going to need to create a life of freedom. See, you use these words in your book. I really wish that my husband was here, because you use these words like freedom and choose, and you say things like do it afraid. And these are all things where my husband is like, yes, that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's what I want. So you talk about building this quartet, and how you can, like, identify your starting five lineup. And I just want you to talk to us a little bit about the importance of having tools and being intentional about choosing those tools to get what you want.
Yeah. I mean, and understand that the tools are, you want to be flexible. They're tools, they're not rules, right? So you want to use the tools that serve you. And one of the things that I think doesn't serve us is this age-old thinking that there's work-life balance, that there's this kind of perfect balance, you know, because if work-life was really balanced, you know, someone would go to a job for 2 hours and the boss would say, you've been here 2 hours, you better go do Pilates for 2 hours to balance out the day, right? It doesn't work like that.
Right. So
for me, it's like the jazz quartet of, there's different things in your life. You're creating the global leaders in your business. You're a mother. You're a wife. You know, you're an author. So there's things in your life. A jazz quartet, the music doesn't all play together, right? There's no balance of the music. What happens is sometimes the saxophonist has the solo. Sometimes the bass has the solo. But all together, it makes beautiful music. So when you identify the tools in your life and the things that you really value the most, there's going to be a give and take. There's going to be an integration. There's some days where I work longer, and because I communicate that with my family, they understand that. And there's some days I put work all to the side and I'm just all in with my children. And that takes practice. And to me, that's the balance of the jazz quartet, and utilizing the tools. And the other thing is, people make life way too complicated, right? So a lot of people, they see me, right, in social media, and they're like, man, you do so much. I see you here, you travel all, and I do the same 3 things. I just do it over and over again, right? Like, I spend a whole lot of time with my children, right? I travel, and I create a business that I really try to impact people in their lives. Yeah. And what I usually do is try to combine those 3 together. So people see and they're saying, oh, you're so busy. I'm actually not. I got a lot of free time, but I know the priorities. Where you won't see me, and I'm not dissing anybody. Yeah. You won't see me in the club, right? Because the club just doesn't serve me. Now, if the club serves you and that brings you joy, let that be part of it. And there's nothing wrong with it. But people aren't clear on really what they really enjoy and love, and focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So your kids are amazing. I love all the little anecdotes and stories that you share in your book. If you guys have not picked up this book yet, pick it up. It's amazing. So what are some traits that you are really striving to pass on to your kids?
Yeah. So my daughter, who I speak about in the book, that's our firstborn. She just graduated from college. So we just went to a graduation last week in Florida. It was
congratulations.
Amazing. Yes, she's like, and I don't say this just to say it. It's so true that I've been taught by a lot of different people, and my 3 children have taught me more about life and love than anyone in the world. And they teach me as much as I teach them. But some of the things that I've tried to instill in them is one, curiosity, right? Like, the beauty of children that adults get wrong all the time is the children are so curious, and it brings about their creative flow. And adults, I have a saying that I say to them: don't grow up, it's a trap, right? Because a lot of times, and I don't mean growing up in responsibility sense, in some people identify growing up with like being serious, or now I got to get serious. School is over. People telling my daughter, now you got to get serious. It's the real world. Like, no. Just keep being curious in the world. Keep exploring. Keep having that childlike commitment to learning. The other thing I teach them is to be empathetic. You don't have to. Sympathy and empathy is 2 different things. Really try to put yourself in other people's shoes and understand that even if you don't like what someone's doing, they're doing the best they can with the current state of thinking that they have. And if you look at that, you'll be less judgmental of others. And the third thing is, when in doubt, just love. I think that love is very powerful, and it starts with loving yourself.
Absolutely. I agree. You want to implement these things into your kids. You're teaching really the community, and you have a lot of communities of men that you work with, different organizations that you serve with, and you have your own organization as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your organizations and the things that they do in the community, and then how we can find and get plugged into those things?
Yeah, so I've created my own community. Fatherhood is Leadership, and you can find that at fatherhoodisleadership.com. I work with a lot of high-performing fathers and fathers in the community. So some of my clients that I coach are everybody from professional athletes to people who work in finance, all different industries, who at some point have found some kind of success, but then yet, what is the legacy you're leaving? They don't have time with their children, or they're not making a difference in the community. So that's kind of the work that I do. And I created something called the Global Game Changers. So we're on the same page with Global. It's started out as a group. It's I have a Facebook group around it, but I also do events every year, twice in New York, once in LA, once in Europe, that bring together people, men and women, who are really about transforming their lives and their leadership. So that's what I'm really up to. You can find me, fatherhoodisleadership.com or devonbandison.com. And then I go into organizations. There's nonprofits I go into. There's pro sports organizations I go to that I really work on what leadership and transformation is. And that's, you know, I love it. It's the best work in the world, really seeing an impact on how people can transform their life, their love, their leadership. And it's one of those, as you know, one of those careers where I don't feel like I'm working. Like, I feel like I'm getting paid to learn more about myself and really be of service to others. And it is work. Don't get me wrong. I show up. It takes work to create a business as I created it. And yet I find joy in it every day.
Your legacy has already impacted my little growing family. So when my kids start graduating from college and all of that, I'm just excited to stay connected with you and to be able to tell you, like, hey, they were able to do these things because of the things that you sowed into my husband and I's life. So I just want to thank you. I want to thank you.
I'm honored, and that I received that and appreciate that. I'm humbled by it, and thank you.
You're welcome.
And you're doing great work as well. You know how this work is, right? It's like throwing a pebble in the pond. There's a ripple effect, right? So you impact one person's life, but then there's a ripple effect of the lives that we all have an impact on. So I want to acknowledge you for, you know, even having the wisdom to have a show like this and all the great work you're doing as well.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, well, Devon, I appreciate you. I know you have an event to get to, so I'm just grateful that you took the time out to be with us today. And I hope you have a great rest of the week.
All right. Thanks, Liana. Keep up the good work.
You're welcome.